All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. So, with Dante Unbound, we also got the Inaros rework. So, of course, we must do an Inaros refresh as he is pretty different now, although maybe not as much as I would have hoped. So, for that, to start, let's go over what the new build looks like, and it looks like this. Relatively similar, but now we actually run power stats because he has powers that are worth using. So, for that, we are, of course, running a lot of strength. We're running Blind Rage, Transient Fortitude, and we're also doing a good chunk of range with Overextended, and kind of getting back some of our duration and getting a little overage with Prime Continuity. And we're also using 2 Umbral mods with Umbral Intensify for even more strength and Umbral Vitality because, of course, Inaros is a health tank, and he has a ton of it and no shields. We're going to have something. In terms of the defenses, we're also running Adaptation. This is, of course, just like a huge amount of DR that you're going to get for just being shot at, which is going to happen pretty often. Other than that, we're also running Molt Augmented for, you guessed it, even more strength. And, of course, we're on Energy Siphon and Mobilize up here. You could run Power Drift, but I really prefer the speed, well, because we're already quite high on strength anyway. And for Energy Siphon, this could be a lot of different things depending on what you want to do. Could be Steel Charge, could be, like if you wanted to do Dreamers instead for like the health regen, though I don't think it matters, you could also do that. There's plenty of options up here, just something that's not Brief Respite. And that's what's going on here. In terms of energy economy, our energy economy is generally very, very good. I know we're at negative efficiency, but we don't cast that much, and we're going to kill a lot of enemies with very few abilities. So we're using Arcane Steadfast. This could theoretically be energized, but we don't have that big of an energy pool. And this is with 1 Tau Blue Shard. So Arcane Steadfast is overall just going to be more valuable for us whenever it does go off. Then we're going to get out of energized because our abilities are still very, very cheap. Speaking of abilities, let's talk about what the new setup for Inaros abilities is 1, Desiccation. This is mostly the same, though has been affected by some other changes we had with the Dante Unbound update that I'm going to go over. But by and large, this is still what it was before. Just throw sand, open enemies to finishers, they're blinded for a good long time. His 2 is Sandstorm now. So this is made much, much better. You are much, much faster during it. And basically, it does damage now if you put on Elemental Sandstorm and give it a large amount of status chance. And it is also based off of your melee weapon, so you now have a stat stick for Inaros. We're going to get into more of that in a moment, but basically, Sandstorm is actually a DPS ability for Inaros to be using. And then his 3 is Scarab Shell. So, Scarab Shell is basically half of what his prior 4 was. And this is just all defense. This makes you status immune, and you use 5% of it each time you become status immune, and it also gives you armor. It gives you way more armor. As you're seeing, we're getting 871 at this amount of strength, and that will go up after Molt Augmented, of course. And it costs health, not energy, in order to keep this built up, which you're going to be fine with because Sandstorm now regenerates you to full health basically no matter what whenever you press the button, unless every single enemy is dead before you press it. So, no issues in terms of health regeneration. And then we have Scarab Swarm. So this is the other half of his 4. And now you can just cast this for energy. And it deals 10% of your total health as damage over ticks that always tick corrosive damage. And it has a very large range and a very good spread radius. And it lasts a decent amount of time, starting at 15 seconds. That being said, I don't think this ability is worth casting. And for the build, we actually get rid of it in favor of Roar. Roar helps you DPS with your 2, and your new 4 really doesn't do anything. You can't scale your health to the point where it'll actually do meaningful damage, because even if I had 10 times as much health as I do now, that damage is still not worthwhile outside of mostly regular path. And while I could also go in and build around this and add 2 green shards so that this can strip armor, that's actually just slower than killing enemies with Sandstorm. So there's no real reason to build around this, and because its healing has been removed, also its damage is pitiful, all this really is a kind of slow to activate crowd control that sticks around a good long time and turns enemies into cats that can help spread it sometimes. And that's just not really worthwhile. If this ability was able to kill enemies, if I gave it the green shards, that would be probably good enough to keep, but as it stands, I actually prefer to keep Desiccation for some reasons that we're going to go into. So, unfortunately, his 4th ability was cut in half, and we're getting rid of the worst half and keeping our Scarab Shell. For that, this is the build as we went over. In terms of shards, there's actually a lot of things that you could add here. I've gone with just at least the energy max increase because I don't feel like you really want anything else that badly. Though you will want at least one regular energy max shard, as like it can be kind of a pain otherwise, although it is certainly not unplayable. And in terms of the other slots, honestly, parkour speed is going to be very good. You could do more strength because if you do, you know, the 4 Tau strength shards here, that does immediately kick you over 300%. And because Sandstorm is just equal to your power strength in terms of its status chance, that is much, much better. But that's totally unnecessary, as you're going to see. Now, for the melee weapon stat stick for your Sandstorm, this works kind of weird, and there's a bunch of options that we're going to talk about. My preferred option is Nami Solo. However, for just stat sticking, Nami Solo is not the best option. Weirdly, the best option is the Dorklov, which is Dagath's weapon. The reason that this is the best option for purely stat sticking Sandstorm is because this is the only melee weapon in the game that is only slash damage. So the only proc you can get is slash if you are using the Dorklov. For that, the build is as such. This is the build for stat sticking on Inaros, and of note, this does have melee crescendo on it. You do not need melee crescendo in order to make Inaros work, but you do kind of get some extra stuff out of Inaros that we're going to talk about. But basically, the gist of what this build is Prime Pressure Point, Sacrificial Steel, Organ Shatter, Primed Reach, and Quickening. Those mods don't matter at all for stat sticking on Inaros. All that matters is that I've added Viral with Vicious Frost and Virulent Scourge for the 60% for viral damage. And then I've added Buzzkill for 120% more slash. If we look at our status breakdown, we have 34.2% slash and 18.6% viral. So we're going to get basically twice the amount of slash procs as we are going to get viral procs, but we will get both. That transfers directly to Sandstorm. So this split is what you have to worry about in terms of what is actually going to be the statuses available through Sandstorm. So you could really build it for whatever element you want, but just raw building it for viral slash means it's going to output a lot of damage that is going to ignore armor on all of the enemies that it affects, which is really good. That being said, the Dorklov is obviously not the strongest thing in the world. It is a cool weapon that can perform at higher levels, and actually with this build you can kill high level armored enemies with it, but its heavy attack leaves much to be desired. So other very good options for this exact build are the Nakana Prime, which has an excellent heavy attack that always procs slash, and also in terms of its spread, you have the 25-2 versus the basically 1% of its impact and puncture, so its spread also very much supports this build. So if you like using a Nakana, this is an excellent option. Also, for those of you that just got access to the Dex Nakana, this is also pretty much in the same ballpark in terms of its spread. It's a little bit worse than, of course, Nakana Prime, but that's kind of this weapon in all ways, although the Nakana Prime is one of the best weapons in the game, so you take what you can get for free, right? But this is also going to be a great option for Inaros. And, of course, as I said, my preferred option is Nami Solo. This is the Nami Solo Incarnon, and there are a few things I want to talk about with it. So, the build on this is identical. Same exact thing, except for I've got Amalgam Organ Shatter on here for faster heavy attacks. And if you have Crescendo, and notably, you only need one copy of Crescendo to make this work, Inaros has multiple ways to open to finishers. His 2 opens to finishers, and of course his 1 opens to finishers, and you can build them up very easily and get to 12x combo as a thing that is a constant state for the Nami Solo. When you do that, Nami Solo is getting, obviously, its plus 80 damage, and then the on-finisher 20% health regeneration a second for 10 seconds. It's worth noting that this doesn't work. It completely doesn't work at all, because what this says is that you get 20% of your health per second for 10 seconds, but what this does is actually, you guessed it, nothing. So hopefully that gets fixed at some point, but this actually regenerates no health and does nothing, and I also wanted to point that out. But just the damage is really what matters here, although the health regeneration really would be nice on this all-health Warframe. And then for our evolution 3, we are reducing our we're increasing fall off by plus 60%. So hopefully this gets a pass for clarity at some point. But what this means is that the follow through on this weapon is actually going to go to 1 instead of being at 0.7 right down here. What that means is that no matter how many enemies you hit with an attack, your damage never goes down. And that's what this evolution actually does for the Nami Solo. So it is definitely the one you want, especially with the way Inaros uses it. And for our final evolution, just the crit chance is what you're going for. And the reason I like the Nami Solo is because whenever you build it up and give it the crescendo and give it, infinite heavy attacks at 12x, its heavy attack is this spin, and that hits all enemies around you multiple times and proc slash a ton, and that synergizes perfectly with him spinning around in his 2, putting enemies in a pile, and then spinning around whenever they all hit the ground, allowing you to do massive amounts of damage to grouped up enemies. Obviously, this is with no build-up whatsoever, but even with no build-up whatsoever, it's, honestly not bad. Also, we have Inaros' new passive here, as you can see, which is you go into, sand form, and if you hit enemies enough, you will stand back up. This is much, much better than his awful, awful coffin, but it's still not very good, as you can see. It took me a while to stand back up there. That being said, it's better than what we had, and if enemies are grouped up, you can get up pretty quickly, but I really wouldn't count on that to save you. So that's why we use the Nami Solo, is because it's just very good for that, and it's especially high damage whenever you evolve it, which you can have 100% uptime on with your finishers. In terms of the test here, I wanted to show a couple things off with the abilities in terms of how they work before we actually get into it. So we're going to pause the AI here and to talk about how the abilities actually function. So his 3, you can move during it now. So this is nice. You just build up this armor and then you are immune to status. Obviously, you spend health to do that, but you can get that back very quickly. His 1. So the main change to his 1 is that when you press 1, finishers have been changed to have this red marker designate when an enemy can be finishered, which you just use by hitting your interact key, and you can see the finishers are reasonably strong. Being able to just have full access to these, of course, is what lets us use melee crescendo, and that's quite good. In terms of our 2, you turn into a tornado, and you can just spin away. It has very, very good grouping now. It will grab enemies from a good distance, and also, as you can see, it's killing a few of these enemies. In terms of the actual general performance of this group is level 225, which is newly available in this simulacrum, and they're Steel Path, and this is the Orokin battle group that is also just for the kind of the new testing battle groups that they put in, and I've just decided that that's pretty good. We're just going to use the Orokin one, as that's kind of the strongest group, other than maybe the Murmur one, which we could use as well, but either way, this is the one that we're going to go towards. But yeah, these enemies, they die instantly. If you use Roar into a 2, these enemies don't like it. Usually they will all die. Sometimes they'll survive with a sliver of health after the slash. You can see they're just grounded and just dying. Yeah, these 2 have a little tiny bit of health left, but you can just cast this into this, and because this sucks up all the enemies and they follow with you very easily, you're going to be chain casting this through a map pretty much as you want. It's very usual for this to be turn on Roar and just spin through and grab all the enemies and bring them to the rest of the enemies, because you're just going to spin into another one, and then you're going to pick up all the enemies that you just dropped out of your 2 whenever it ended, and continue to seek and destroy more enemies, just spinning around as a dust devil, killing everyone. And it's a pretty effective playstyle. I really wish that the rework had made his 4 more of the thing that was killing enemies. But this is still way, way better than what Inaros had before, which was effectively absolutely nothing. The finisher changes really make his 1 a lot more impactful, and he's able to do a lot more melee stuff that way. And his 3 being able to move and just, that's very effective as well, is quite good. So yeah, I mean, it's really that simple. We're pretty much going to be using our 2 to DPS. And if we want to set stuff up with finishers, we can have a melee weapon that's always on 12x combo, which is pretty powerful. If any acolytes show up, they don't like that, as it turns out, and we'll be showing that. But again, because I know most people don't have a set of crescendo, and that could not be expected of anyone, you really do only need a single copy More is always better, but the effect of the arcane just gets faster as you get more, not really better in any way. So yeah, that's what's going on with Inaros. Let's jump into Steel Path and just sandstorm some dudes, and they're not going to like it very much. All right, let's go. But yeah, this is going to be very, very easy. The new Inaros is a simple beast. He would like to spin. If you would like to spin, you are going to have an excellent time. We are also going to be doing kind of like the full setup with the Nami solo and everything here, just to show it off for those of you that do have any copies of Crescendo. I really should have charged up my 3, but it's not a big deal. See how fast our 2 regenerates our health, which is to say it regenerates it instantaneously. You can see we actually we actually bring energy with us from place to place, so. Usually whenever you press 2, you're going to refill all of the energy, if not more than all of the energy that you spent on it. Especially in Steel Path, where the enemy spawns are, like, you know, actually good. We're just cleaning up the tile set. Doing a little spring cleaning here. It's actually really, really good at keeping the enemies you're picking up with you, which is excellent because like it's one of the things that could really make this horrible if the enemies could easily escape it. And then enemies like Eximus, of course, are like not vulnerable to this, so you will have to kill them, you know, more regularly. Not that that's particularly difficult. We're just getting some of our charges here. But with a max Crescendo, you only need to kill 20 guys with finishers, which you can see is not exactly particularly hard. Like these enemies, I mean, that's 200,000 damage, and finisher damage ignores armor, so you're not really going to have any troubles whatsoever getting those kills. And that's done right there. So now we just have our big heavies, if we should so choose. Should so choose, I mean. And if enemies are surviving, you can just spin. It will take a second, as you can see, for me to recharge back up the combo, because it does take a moment to go back to 12x, which is always a weird thing about gaining permanent combo, is that it does technically go away very temporarily. From here, this tile is actually like kind of you can see just like how good the heavy attacks at 12x are on those Eximus. Although you'll really see it on the Acolyte, who's not going to appreciate this much whenever they finally show up. You can end your 2 early as well, so if there's an enemy that particularly needs dealing with, you can do so. Also, you're invincible during your 2, so enemies can't really do anything about this, even if they are trying to kill you while you're in your 2. They kind of just have to wait their turn, which maybe never if they just die to it. Yeah, we'll go back up through those like initial hallways though, as that's going to be a bit easier in terms of like getting all the enemies collected. And in terms of kill rate, we're like 3 minutes in. We're at 299, but I've kind of been messing around with my 1 and stuff and not, you know, choosing very good tiles either. You can see energy-wise, really no issues to be had here. Like, just like a nearly perfect energy economy. And once you've built up your melee weapon to always have 12x, it's, you know, you're always going to have access to a very powerful attack to kill an Eximus and grab an energy orb. And usually 1 energy orb is going to get you to your next sandstorm, so regular enemies are a short jaunt away from just all dying. Yeah, you can see these enemies having come out of that big tile. Now ready to be spun up. Eximus here. Kill them. Spin these guys up. This Acolyte's really not going to like it. Hey there. They're dead now. Yeah, so... Yeah, 12x melees. Sometimes it's just like that. Turns out whenever a Warframe opens you up for Crescendo, it's usually pretty good. Ash has the similar kind of experience with this. Although he's always using the Inadem, but it's not like that's a problem either. Yeah, Inaros has joined Ash as Warframes that can actually get something out of Crescendo. Also, of course, ground finishers, which do count for Crescendo, by the way. If you just, like, hit 2 and then drop it before, like, any of these guys die, those ground finishers do count towards, like, charging Crescendo up. And if you have lower rank Crescendos, it's actually really this way I would suggest doing it, because you can hit a lot of enemies at once doing it that way. It's heavy attack, this Examine. Also, it is worth noting for the Nami solo, technically there are other melee weapons that are kind of like harder single target damage. Like you could use like Hate, for example. It's another Incarnate that's quite good at this. And then Akana Prime as well. It's a much smaller heavy attack and it's not a circle, so it's not great for, you know, sandstorming and then spinning. But it does do more actual like single target damage on average than the Nami solo will. Nami solo just has the other advantages, which is groups, which I think I prefer overall because I'm not really gonna run into enemies that can survive the Nami solo one, so it being a better shape for killing enemies is kind of more important to me personally. Charge our 3 back up here. You can see just like, we're always full health. We're always full health. But yeah, it's kind of crazy, like, I was really hoping that the 4 we got from the Inaros rework was gonna be worthwhile. And I know I'm not really like showing it off obviously in this video because it isn't worthwhile, but if anyone can make it work, please let me know, because even using Roar on it, it's just pitiable amounts of damage. Like the only things I could think of for even forcing it to work, not being good, but forcing it to work, is like combining it with like Nidus health increases and Wisp and everything else. And like doing the math on like the numbers you could see on Inaros, like say for example, if you got Inaros up to like 40k health, if you went and did that, the amount of damage he'd be doing is still only like 4,000, which is sad at best. So hopefully they change something about Inaros to make it so that his 4 has like scaling or something going for it in terms of actually like killing enemies, because as it stands, it's weirdly his weakest ability, even though it's kind of brand new. Like it has completely new visuals and everything else. So it's strange that it's so weak, if I'm honest. Yeah, we're at 7.5 minutes, just had about 700 kills, and considering like the total safety that this is, like, I mean, enemies just simply aren't going to be able to kill you at any reasonable level. Like, you can die, but like Ken is doing a lot of heavy lifting, because you're invincible just most of the time if you want to be, outside of like taking out like some single targets. So you're pretty resilient to anything that can really be thrown at you. It's really just that your 2 doesn't kill things that are status immune or can't be picked up. But all the fodder enemies just get swept away. And it's also really nice, actually. One of the places I really enjoyed using this was actually Netracells, because you can just hit 2, go get enemies from outside the circle, and then bring them in, drop them, and just spin around. And they all die. So it's actually really great for Netracells, like just going to collect the enemy. Inaros doesn't have any problems with really any of like the Netracell debuffs as far as I know. So like it's actually kind of nice for that if you're looking to switch up who you're doing Netracells at. I've found it to be quite good there with a little bit that we did do with Inaros in there. But yeah, just in general, like Roar into 2, do a lot of viral slash procs. Who knew that'd be good, huh? Yeah, this was a good thing for Inaros to be able to do, I think. And you're dead now. Yeah, Torment's dead. Also, if you really hate the Acolytes, Violence can't turn off you spinning in a circle with a melee weapon. So, if you really just want them to absolutely hate it, there's not a single Acolyte that can give you a problem with this. None of them have anti-Nami solo heavy attack at 12x tech. That's just not going to happen. It's not a thing that they deal with at really any level. Like, even if you're doing, like, Cascade to, like, max level, the Acolytes aren't going to be a problem. They're not going to... You're going to have much more trouble with Thrax enemies than with anything the Acolytes are going to throw at you. Just getting rid of some Eximus. And that's 10 minutes, 933 total kills. I will say that, like, a little bit tile set dependent, and, like, also I was kind of goofing off. It's worth noting that, like, I've gotten, like, 1100 in 10, so a little bit map dependent, and, like, a bit of goofing around and talking definitely affects that. But yeah, I think that new Inaros, he's pretty good. I wish that there was more with his rework. Specifically, it's just that I guess I really wanted his 4 to be good. But this Elemental Sandstorm thing, I mean, hey, it's infinitely better than anything that Inaros was doing before, right? Like, it is much, much better. You actually want to use abilities. The new finisher changes make your 1 much more appealing, and that's pretty good. He's got a good 1, 2, and 3, and if his 4 is a bit lackluster, you know, that's 75% ain't bad. 75% ain't bad. But yeah, that's the Inaros rework. Pretty good overall. Pretty good. Yeah, that's gonna do it. I will see you guys tomorrow for, in all likelihood, Nezha. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. And also, of course, thanks, as usual, to the patrons for supporting the channel, especially the $10 patrons: Alex Parnham, Andrew, Arbiter Daydream, Benuven, Plotomatic, Brutus Salazar, Canolathra, Dylan Dworsky, Ethrain, Havon, James Harsthorne, JC4 Science, John Lobdell, Joshua Adams, Luzanth, Malachix Williams, Mikokel, Minty Ginja, Michta, Nerve, Moxidate, Ruby, Sanyu, Skur, Sharp247, Camarilla Wastelander, The Coupon of Death, Tomeworm, Victor Palmer, Waifu Wars, Waldad, and Seraphir. And of course, thank you to all of the $5 patrons as well. Your support is extremely, extremely appreciated. But yeah, we're about to get the Dante update. Should be an excellent time. Expect tons of videos to be coming about all the changes and new stuff that we're getting in that update, and should be excellent. And then the tier list will hopefully shortly follow.